89 episodes down, and wow, oh wow, we have a mountain to climb, because guess what? At the top, at the summit, we got episode 100, and don't worry, I'm still working on it. It's going to happen. We're going to get a great guest, as always, but let's focus on episode 90, because we got a great show. Let me just say it like that. We got a great show, because we're going to be joined by two head coaches, one coach being from Morgantown High School, the other one being from Wheeling Central High School as well. So let's just get right to it. I'm excited. Let's get right to it. And first off, we're going to be joined by the Morgantown Mohegans girls head basketball coach, Coach Jason White. Coach, welcome to the program.
Hey, Taylor, thanks so much for having me. I always appreciate it.
Now, for folks that don't know, Coach White is a huge Bengals fan, and I guarantee you he probably had like the the orange and black face paint on, as if a tiger just clawed his face, as like the Bengals end zone is. He probably had his Joe Burrow jersey on. He probably had Jamar Chase socks as well with his Bengals hat. He was probably all decked out, if I had to guess. Coach, do you concur with that?
If we didn't have a game, I might very well look like that. But, I had to stream some of it coming up the road. We played yesterday in George Washington, had a big road trip this weekend. So, I got to catch the second half, and, man, I was on the edge of my seat.
Well, let's talk about that weekend. I mean, you guys go 1-1 this weekend. You guys followed up Cabell Midland down in Ona by 37-34, but you rebound yesterday and you beat George Washington. So let's start there. From a collective aspect, you guys have now won 5 of your last 6 games. Give me your general thoughts on where this team is at so far and what needs to improve for this year's team.
Yeah, I think we're a little behind. I think, especially on the offensive end of the floor, we're not quite clicking like we need to if we really want to make a serious run at a state championship. We've been dealt, some hard times. Going clear back to the week before Christmas, we got hit pretty bad with the flu. It kind of went through the team. We had several kids out. We were very short-staffed in practice. And then, obviously the choppiness of the holiday break. We played 3 games in Charleston, South Carolina. We come back. I get COVID. We get a couple of kids that are out. We've got, still got a couple of kids out. So we haven't had a full practice with our entire team dating clear back to the second week of December. And I think you can tell that. I think our offense we just haven't repped it enough together as a whole group. But our defense is elite. It's a special, it may be the best defensive group I've ever had. And I've had some great defensive teams at Morgantown High. I was kind of crunching the numbers to see where we are defensively. We've played 13 games. We've held all 13 opponents to under what they average on the season. And we do that to a tune of we're averaging holding teams 25 points less than what they average in the rest of their schedule, which is just crazy. I mean, I think as a coach, if you can hold a team under what they average, you've done well. We're holding them 25 points below what they average. And it's not like we play a cupcake schedule. We've traveled around. We've played the best of the best that's out there. We've already played 2 of the top 3 teams in Class 4A in the rankings. We've already played a Wheeling Park. We've already played a Cabell Midland. The only team that we haven't seen in 4A is Huntington. And we get an opportunity here in a couple of weeks to go down and play Capital. So, we're not afraid to play people. But even with that being said, I mean, our defense has just been outstanding.
I know, just looking at these numbers, I mean, it's astounding to say the least. I mean, I'm looking at the first few games, and your first 4 games, you hold your opponent to below 30 points, 16 points, 23 points, 21 points, 25 points. I mean, holy cow. I mean, so let me ask you about this. Philosophically, would you consider yourself more of an offensive coach or a defensive coach?
Oh, definitely a defensive coach. And really, when I got into head coaching, I never came to Morgantown saying I want to be a defensive coach or an offensive coach. It worked out that my philosophy in coaching has always been, to really try to prepare my kids as best I can. So, I'm big into scouting. I'm big into watching film, and I'm big into trying to get our kids prepared for what another team's going to do. And I'm a big proponent in trying to take away what you do best and make somebody else beat us, not get beat by your best. And I think our kids have really bought into that philosophy. And, we always hype it up to the kids that defense wins championships. It may not be pretty, but, and we win very ugly. It's not always the best basketball if you're a pure basketball purist to come watch, because we want to muddy up the game. We want to make it ugly. We want to create a lot of turnovers. We tease our kids right now because we're not scoring the ball like we can, that we just in general hate points. We don't like to give them up. We don't like to score them. But no, in all seriousness, we've always thought, like, if we offensively could get to 40, we're going to have a chance to win the game, because defensively, our goal is always to keep you under 40.
You mentioned how you believe that this is your best defensive group collectively. What separates this team's defensive mindset compared to other teams that you've coached?
Well, I think it's a couple things. One, I think it's our athleticism. Not that I didn't coach some athletes before. I mean, we went through a stretch of winning 3 consecutive state championships, and we had some really good athletes. I mean, one of those basketball teams at one point had 6 college basketball players on it at one time. So we've had some athletes, but what makes this group different, I think, is our depth. So, we're playing pretty consistently 9 kids in a rotation. And then each of those kids are long, they're athletic, and then they each bring something different defensively to the table. So depending on the lineup that we have in the game, it allows us to play different styles of defense. So we're not just a man-to-man team, or we're not just a 2-3 team, or a 3-2, or a full court pressing team. We switch those things up and depending on who we have in the game. And I think this group has really bought into, again, paying attention to detail on the defensive end of the floor, attacking that game plan, and really trying to limit what you want to do in a game, taking away your best options. And then we have a couple just really, really good individual on-ball defenders. And the kids really like playing together. And when you got some really good on-ball defenders that can get up and can take somebody's best option or 2 options away, and the kids like each other, then they know that they've got help behind them. So this group's really, really good. Their communication is probably the single thing that sets them apart.
You guys are in the midst of a 6-game away trip. You guys just played 2 games down in Charleston. Your next game, according to the SSAC website, is against Lindsley. When you look at this stretch of 6 games, well, pretty much if you look at it as well, 7 of your last 8 games are on the road. Your only home game is against Martinsburg on February the 12th. So when you look at the rest of the schedule and how it is laid out, what do you want to see from your team in these last few games?
Well, one of the biggest challenges being the coach at Morgantown High presents, and I don't think it's necessarily this way everywhere. It's really hard to schedule games. We're, other than University High, there's not a lot of 4A teams right around us. Preston's here. We don't play Preston. You got Wheeling Park, but they're an hour and 15 minutes away. We do play them twice, but we only play Brook, or we don't play Brook at all. We only play John Marshall once. So it's really hard to get home games. So a lot of these teams that do agree to play us, they don't want to travel to us because it's quite a distance to get here. So we typically have had a ton of away games, and this year's no different. I mean, I think if you look at our schedule, I think we only have 6 scheduled home games throughout the entire season. But I try to embrace that. And we don't get to play a state championship or a state tournament game at Morgantown High School. So we need to get out on the road, and we need to feel what it, kind of get that feel of what it's like to shoot in other gyms and get put in those pressure situations. The atmosphere Friday night at Cabell Midland was great. They came out, they had a great support. I just thought, that game, even though we lost that game at the buzzer, that game is going to do so much for us and our young team to grow up and to have played in that environment and that situation. I love getting out on the road and playing really, really good teams that are really going to challenge us and make us better.
You mentioned the youth of this year's team. 1 senior on this year's team, and then just by the looks of it, 5 juniors as well. So it seems like a lot of your players will be coming back next season alone from that 1 senior. But when you look at the youth of this team, does that seem to be a problem for you all, or is it just a a maturity thing and a growth standpoint as well? Do you guys just try and tackle head on?
Well, I think, at times you got to remind yourself as a coach, hey, that girl that's making that mistake is a freshman or a sophomore, even a junior. Some of our not very many of our juniors have had a ton of minutes. We've got a junior in Lindsay Bechtel that started for us for 2 years. And then we got senior Carrington Piasek, who is a tremendous leader. I mean, you look at Carrington and you say, well, she may only average like 2 points a game, but it's her intelligence, her basketball IQ is off the charts. I mean, she's always in the right place. She's communicating with her teammates. She's a great passer. She sees the floor really well. But at times our youth shows. And I thought, again, the environment, the situation, the moment Friday night may have been a little much for us, but that's good. That's how we're going to grow up. That's how we're going to learn. I would rather learn that now, Taylor, in the middle of a season than to be put in our first pressure situation come, March 10th or 11th, and you're on that state tournament, the Civic Center floor in a semifinal or a quarterfinal matchup. You'd rather get through some pressure situations here early in the year.
Talk about Lindsay Bechtel. You mentioned how she's a 2-year starter. How good has she progressed in her game and in her leadership role over these last few games?
Well, she'd been in a little bit of a slump. But the one thing she's always done for us is she's always tackled defending one of the opponent's best players. She really is locked in defensively. She really pays attention to detail. She's a super great kid, and she's really, really coachable. So, when you tell Lindsay that we're going to go under this screen or we're going to go over that screen, or she really pays attention to that detail. And then she's also a kid that, never shows too much emotion. She's always pretty even keeled. I mean, she doesn't get too high. She doesn't get too low if things are going bad. So she's able to keep her emotions in check. And I think that's what kind of makes her special, is that she knows that on a given night, it's not about what she can score for us. It's about how she can keep another team's best player from scoring. And she embraces that. And I think a lot of our kids do. I certainly would like to be a little bit more offensive minded, but she knocked down a couple big threes yesterday. She attacked the rim at GW really, really well. And it was nice to see her kind of get out of that offensive slump. So
I want to talk about the leadership role that a lot of your players have been, handling this season, because I think as a coach, and you could probably agree with me with what I'm about to say, it seems like when you have a certain group of girls or guys within a team that can assume the leadership role, that makes your job a whole lot easier. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And we like you mentioned, we've got several juniors in the program, and then we've got Carrington, our senior. Those kids are the leaders. I mean, they are really, really good kids, and they're really good friends off the court, which makes things even easier. So it's so much easier to accept criticism from somebody that you're friends with, as opposed to somebody who you're trying to, where are they coming from? But really and honestly, every one of these kids likes their teammates. So it makes coaching so much easier when, you've got coaches on the floor, so they're out there and they're able to talk and make adjustments. And the one area that I think we've improved the most in from last year to this year is just our on the floor communication. So, kids are talking to each other, they're making adjustments on the fly. And that's been really, probably one of the biggest differences in our team.
I want to talk about your guys' region, because it always seems like your guys' region and section are always so difficult in Class Quad A. I mean, you mentioned how you guys have yet to play Huntington, but you'll probably see them in the state tournament if you guys make it. Capital, you'll see them down the road as well. But before we talk about the overall class, let's talk about your section and region. When you look at this group of teams this year, how would you compare this group of teams this season compared to other teams in Class Quad A?
Well, I think it's like every year. I mean, every year our region it is right up there with the best. And you kind of mentioned it. It's one of the toughest regions, I think, in the state of West Virginia. We had a run there of about 8 consecutive years where somebody from our region played in the state championship game. We played in it my first 3 seasons. Buchanan played in it for a couple of years. I mean, so somebody from the university was in it. So somebody from our region was represented in that state championship, for a stretch of years there. And every night's a battle. There are so many quality teams, not just in our section, but in our region. You look up, you got Wheeling Park, you got University on the other side. You got Buchanan Upshire's got a heck of a team. Preston's had a good team the last couple of years. So there are no nights that you can take off when you're playing in this section, in this region. And how important it is to try to win your section, because you really want to host that regional. The teams are so good, you just don't want to go on the road and try to beat any of these teams. That just makes your path to Charleston so much more difficult.
You've mentioned it a lot, so I want to talk about it before we talk about the rest of Quad A. But you won 3 state championships from 2014 to 2016. You've seen how to mold a championship team. You're working with a lot of youth on this year's team. What does it take for this year's team to not only win its section and region, but also make the state tournament? What needs to happen?
Well, I think with this team, we've got to continue what we've started in the way that we defend. We're not a team that's going to go out and score 80 or 90 points. That's not in our DNA. However, we do have to be better offensively. So, we're a team that's going to continue to put an emphasis on the offensive end of the floor and come to work and practice every day to get better. And then we've got to maintain where we are defensively. We can't have any kind of let up or slip up in that department, because that path to Charleston, if you're going to go through a Wheeling Park, well, Wheeling Park averages 80 a game. You have to find a way to defend them. If we give up 80 to Wheeling Park, we're not going to be successful. That's not us. And same thing if you look at the other side. University High, they're going to average in the 60s. You can't let them get into the 60s if you're going to try to beat them, or a Buchanan who's got 2 tremendous guards. They got a post player that can really play. So this team has got to be better offensively, but they got to stay the course defensively.
And then lastly, let's talk about this Class Quad A field. The test run happened a season ago. From what I've heard from a lot of different people, both on the girls and boys side, people seem to love this Quad A system from Class Quad A down to Class Single A, because it allows different opportunities for different teams. But from a guy that's won it on the Class AAA level, and now 2 is now competing in Class Quad A, I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Thoughts, and just give me your overall thoughts on how you thought last year went with the Quad A system, and how you'll think Class Quad A will be this season with a lot of these teams in the field.
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, the difference between playing in having a 3-class system and going to 4 is obviously you're trying to get more games in the state tournament. And to do that, you had to shuffle the schedule around a little bit. It makes playing in Quad A makes it a little more difficult, because your quarterfinal, semifinal, championship run is over 3 consecutive days, where other classes will get a break depending on where you're seated. You might play on a Wednesday and not play your semifinal till a Friday. So you get that day off. So it's a significant challenge to try to play and win 3 consecutive days, as opposed to having a day of rest in there somewhere. The other thing that I thought, maybe the SSAC would want to take a look at and tweak a little bit. I know last year we were in that matchup, that 4-5 matchup, or that 3-6 matchup with Wheeling Park last year. And, we played the late game in our quarterfinal, which didn't end till, super late. You know how the state tournament goes. That last game's always running a little bit behind. So, you finish up that game and you leave the Civic Center and it's like 11:15, 11:30. You're trying to get your girls back to a hotel. You've just won an emotional game. You've got to turn around and play the next day. And the matchup the next day in that semifinal is the first of the 2 semifinals. And so I thought maybe they would look at that and maybe flip that and make the team that plays the latest game on Thursday night play the later game on Friday night in the semifinals, as opposed to playing the earliest of the Quad A semis. And that was a challenge. I certainly think that helps, the higher seed there significantly. And I think when you get into a semifinal, I think you've got your four best teams theoretically. I think that as they should get an advantage. I don't think it should be as big as an advantage of that amount of hours time gap. So I thought that was the only tweak I would make to the 4-class system would have been just the order of the semifinal games. Other than that, I really liked it. I don't have any problems with playing 3 games in 3 days, and that's kind of why, as a coach, I wanted to go play in this tournament in Charleston, South Carolina. It was 3 games, 3 consecutive days. We're out of town. We're in a hotel. We're together. So it very much mirrored the experience of a state tournament.
Well, Coach, it was a pleasure to speak with you. Good talking to you. Good seeing you as well. I'm glad everything's going well for you. I'm glad everybody is hopefully getting back on the right track, and hopefully you guys can finish out the rest of the season strong since, again, 7 of your next 8 games are on the road. So as my former coach, Coach Chris Stephens used to always tell us, pack your free throws and pack your legs, because it's going to be a long drive ahead.
It's funny that you mentioned, your former coach. That's who I got my start with, was my former coach, Mick Price. And I know you've had him on the show talking about the 100 years of Ravenswood basketball. And I certainly can't wait to get back and be a part of one of those nights. And then I've been blessed. I was an assistant coach with some quality guys. Now, Mick Price, Barry Sanders, at Preston, and then Tom Yester. I mean, I was an assistant coach with guys that have about 2,000 wins, and that's absurd. So it's funny that you mentioned that, but yeah, you definitely, as a coach, you're always ready, and you hope your kids' legs are ready. But I know our girls are looking forward to it. So thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Coach. It was my pleasure as well. And with that being said, we will transition now into our next interview with Coach Mel Stephens of the Wheeling Central Maroon Knights. And welcome back into episode 90 of Hoops Across the Mountain State. Again, I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. Thank you all for joining me. You can find me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast. And you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. So as I said in our intro, we're going to be joined by 2 head coaches. We were just joined by Coach Jason White of the Morgantown Mohegan girls basketball team. Now, let's flip the script. Let's go to the boys' side of high school basketball, and we are pleased to be joined and friend of the program. We are rejoined, I should say, by a friend of the program, Wheeling Central's head basketball coach for the boys, Coach Mel Stephens. Coach, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me, Taylor.
Now, Coach, I don't know if you realize this, but you were one of the original guests, one of the first 10, I should say, and now you're on the 90th episode. Time's flown.
That's nice. I mean, that's quite an honor.
Well, it's always good to speak with you, Coach. And let's talk a little bit about your guys' season so far. You guys are 8-1 this season. A lot of quality wins so far. But let's dissect your brain a little bit. If you had to tell your team that you want to see them improve in what aspect of basketball throughout the rest of this season, what would that be?
I mean, probably rebounding. I think that's such a key to every game. I mean, if you can get stops and, get defensive rebounds, that definitely benefits you. And then, the more offensive rebounds you get, the more chances you get on the offensive end. So I think that's a big area that we're always looking to try to get better in.
Are you pleased with where you're at right now? Again, 8-1 this season. You guys are in the top half of Class AAA and pretty much almost every poll that you look at, AP and coaches. Are you pleased where you're at, or are you still trying to find out what this team's identity is?
I mean, we're obviously pleased where we're at, but I think, there's still room for improvement. I mean, we've got some big games coming up, both state implications along with OVAC implications, up here. So, we're just looking to try to get better.
Well, let's talk about the OVAC this year, because it always seems like each and every year there's always good competition within your guys' conference. When you look at it from the top team to the bottom team, how would you describe the level of competition with this year's OVAC?
Well, I mean, with the number of teams in the OVAC to start with, I mean, there's always really good teams. And I mean, we try to play, as tough of a schedule as we can to to get ready for the OVAC. I mean, our goal every year is to try to get into that top 4, to be able to get into the actual tournament, to try to win the championship. So that's our goal to start with, and we try to schedule that way to try to play better teams, bigger teams, to get us ready, that if we're fortunate enough to get into that top 4, we're ready to play.
I'm looking at your guys' schedule according to the SSAC website, and it seems like 13 of your guys' games are at home. Talk about the beauty of playing at home, because I've been to your guys' gymnasium before. It's always an electric crowd, but talk about the atmosphere that it's been like for you all this season, because it seems like crowds are starting to come back to full capacity and everything else. With last year with COVID, it didn't really seem like there were a lot of crowds, but you had a couple. Then you get into the state tournament. Those crowds were electric. Talk about having fans back into your guys' gymnasium.
Well, it's an important part, of our team. I mean, those guys feed off of that enthusiasm that, basically our fan base, particularly our student section brings. So, to be able to get games at home, in the past, we've always lost a couple home games, with the Undos tournament and CRC, which, both of those, aren't being played this year. So, that gave us a couple extra home games. And like I say, I mean, along with the crowd, just being able to be at home, not have to get on a bus and travel somewhere, that's pretty important for high school kids.
I want to talk about a game that you guys recently won back on December 30th. Granted, that seemed like forever ago, just at how fast time is going by. But when you look at that game against North Marion on December 30th, a buzzer-beating shot by Peyton Toepher, talk about the level of energy in that game, because both teams were going back and forth at each other. It was a gritty game. You guys had to grind that one out. Talk about how big of a win that was for you all.
Well, obviously, any win's a big one, but that, definitely sectional game, on the road against a very, very quality team. And, it was back and forth, and, we were fortunate enough to make a big shot at the end. I mean, we drew up a play to run to try to get us at least tied. And, it didn't quite work out the way we drew it up. But, I mean, Quentin Berlinski took the ball out and made a great read. They doubled off the screen and he threw it to the screener. And then Michael Toepher got the ball, was driving. I'm thinking just take the layup and tie it. But, the help came from the weak side, and he kicked it out to his brother for a good look at a three, and he made it at the buzzer. So, that was a big win for us. It gave us a little bit of momentum, coming out of the break there, and, get ready for, the new year and a new slate of games.
Talk about this team's unique ability just to be able to make plays whenever there's a basketball player coming towards them. It seems like they're able to make the smart play before knowing that player or, events going to happen within that play. Talk about your team's IQ and just its overall ability to read plays before it's actually happening. Do you think that's the biggest strength with this year's team?
I mean, it is, and it's kind of amazing, considering the youth that we have on the team. I mean, we've got 4 seniors, but we do have a couple kids, Leighton Toepher, that got some playing time last year, so that experience I think helps. We've been fortunate in a couple games. I mean, North Marion game, obviously there, Shady Side game the other day was a tough game back and forth. So we've had some tough ones that we were fortunate enough to pull out. Down in Notre Dame the other night, another game, where it's pretty tight throughout. They made a play at the end to tie it, and then we were able to get Ryan made a couple foul shots, and then we made a big defensive play at the end to win it.
Okay, let's talk about this week. There's a lot of good games this week across the state, but you guys have a very busy schedule ahead of you. You guys play Tuesday on the road at Magnolia. You come back home on Friday. You play at home against Oak Glen. And then the marquee matchup against your son, Chris Stevens, and the Winfield Generals, my alma mater. But we won't talk about that quite yet. Let's talk about this week in general. How important is it for you all this week to go 3-0 in such a tough stretch this week?
Well, I mean, actually, the Magnolia game got canceled because of COVID issues down in Magnolia, I guess. So, that one's off the board for now. But, with the weather, that they're calling for tonight and tomorrow. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with tomorrow? But at least we get a couple days to prepare. Oak Glen is a big sectional game, so that's going to be a very important one. And then of course Saturday, I mean, Chris has got those guys playing really well down there, and he's going to be bringing a very good team up here, and we're going to have to be ready to play. That game, along with the family battle a little bit, I guess, is pretty important statewide.
So I asked your son Chris back in one of my earlier episodes for our preview episode talking about last season, and I asked him, I said, are the holidays weird whenever you guys get together with the family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the whole 9 yards? Let's get it from your perspective. Are the holidays weird for you, or is it just like two guys just sit at the table and you're just like, okay, we play each other, that's about it?
No, I mean, they're not weird at all. I mean, I'm extremely proud of the job he's doing down there, and he's a great kid. He was a great player. He's a great coach. It's fun to match up with them guys, and see what happens. But it's still only a game, and when they're up here, I mean, it's just family stuff. We really don't even talk much basketball or anything like that. I mean, it's more just enjoy their company and enjoy having them up here.
Well, I know the Oak Glen game is a very important game for you all in regards to sectional and regional seeding, but when you look at going up against your son and just an overall complexity of scouting them, game plan, how do you go about doing that? What is that game plan? If you want to share, I mean, I'm a reporter. I got to ask the hard hitting questions, but I would assume that the game plan has to change whenever you go up against somebody familiar like your son.
Well, I mean, he's gotten experience from a lot of different places and people. So, I mean, he's doing a really good job down there. I mean, our game plan kind of changes depending on, who we're playing, their personnel, what they do well, stuff like that. So, I've seen him play a couple times. So, I mean, they're very good. They're very deep. They play extremely hard, just like he did. I mean, you were down there, I think, the one night when I was down there, and, they won by 20, and he took him in the back and had him running sprints because he wasn't happy with some of the stuff they were doing. So, he's tough on them, but, they respond to that. They play hard for him, and, they're doing very well. It'll be a tough game on Saturday.
You mentioned how you scouted them, and I love whenever coaches sort of send their assistant coaches out and do some scouting report, doing some personnel work as well. You have a great staff as well. I mean, Lance and Boyd Bybee as well. You have Tyler Mirando as well. Talk about your staff this year. It seems like this season, just with moving up in the Class AAA, you guys played in AAA a season ago, but now that you guys have your feet wet, it seems like the scouting and the personnel of each and every team gets more and more important. And your assistants, from what I've seen so far, have done a tremendous job so far, having to speak with a couple of them. But talk about your staff this year. I would assume that this is a great group of guys, but what would you want to say about this year's coaching staff?
Well, I mean, they're great guys. Number one, they do the best job they can to try to put our kids in a position to be successful, in whatever we're doing. But they do a tremendous job. I mean, people don't realize how much work they put into stuff. I mean, traveling to scout, practice times, everything that's involved with the coaching that, other than just the game, game coaching stuff. I mean, those guys are very dedicated, and, they do a tremendous job for us.
Okay. So again, I'm a reporter. I got to ask the hard hitting questions, but do you see yourself doing this for much longer?
I mean, I got a few more years in me, I think. I mean, I don't know. It's, sometimes the time situations and stuff, especially with JC playing, up at Cal U now playing, he's not getting a lot of playing time this year, but I still like to try to get to as many of his games as I can. I'm hoping that changes, in the next few years where he plays a little bit more. But, I still enjoy doing it. Like I say, I got a great group of assistant coaches, and, I really enjoy, being with the kids and stuff. And, we got a lot of young kids still, and, we got some good young kids that'll be coming up into the high school ranks over the next few years. So, as long as I can still do it, I'm gonna keep going.
you mentioned your roster and how young you guys are. To my count, you guys have 4 seniors on this year's roster. Talk about this year's group of seniors, led by Ryan Riesbeck, who's been on a hot start so far this season. You also have Michael Toepher as well. But talk about this year's group of seniors collectively. What do they mean to this program, and how have you seen them gel together and grow together as well?
Well, I mean, seniors are important, I think, on all teams. I mean, those guys, have been in the program for 4 years. They know what it takes to be successful for us. And they're really great kids that really do a good job of helping the younger kids understand all that stuff. And those guys work hard in the off season, and when those younger guys see that, they just follow along, because they realize that's, if we want to reach our goals, that's the way you have to do it. So those guys have been great. They treat the younger kids really well, and that's that's part of the reason why we are reasonably successful. Is I think we always have that good group of seniors coming back with their leadership, and we always seem to have a good nucleus after they graduate coming back, whether that's a senior group or even a sophomore or a junior group.
Going back to this Winfield game really quickly, because I was told before we went on the air by your son Chris that they're going to be recognizing a few teams, one being a team from the 80s and then obviously one of Chris's teams as well. What was the reasoning behind that, and is that something we can continue to see with you all, just continuing to recognize individuals and teams throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna. I mean, we've tried to do that. We've done that in the past a few times with like 10-year reunions and stuff. But this year we just thought it would be nice. I mean, there's actually 3 teams that we're going to recognize: the '82, the '87, and the 2002. And we talked about it, in the preseason, and we said, this is something we probably ought to try to do every year. Anytime that state championship anniversary, lands on that 5-year anniversary, then we're going to try to recognize them. So, I think with Chris's group, we got a pretty good number of those guys coming back. The 82 and 87, I think there's about 5 or 6 guys from each one of those teams that are coming back. So, it'll be fun. I think it'll be nice for the kids that are on the team now to kind of see that and realize that, there's quite a bit of tradition at Central. And, that those guys that, put in all that work, in those championship years are still being, thanked and recognized.
I want to talk about some players, and we already mentioned the senior class, but within that senior class, I mentioned Ryan Riesbeck, who was recently listed as a nominee for the McDonald's All-American game, I should say. But when you look at Ryan this season, it just seems that each and every year his averages continue to grow. He continues to grow maturely as well. What have you seen from him that's different than years prior?
Well, I think for this year, compared to the last couple of years, I mean, I think his shot selection is much better. His shooting percentage is much, much better than it was, last year. And I think, that comes with maturity. But along with the scoring, I mean, he does so many other things for us. I mean, he's really done a great job rebounding the ball this year. He shares the ball. I mean, he's not afraid to get other guys involved, and just overall his leadership and his work ethic. I mean, that kid puts in so much time in the gym, not only during the season, but in the off season, that, it forces the other guys to kind of step up their game a little bit too.
And then by the looks of your roster, you have 3 Topher brothers playing together. We mentioned Michael. You have Leighton Toepher, and then you have Peyton Toepher as well. Peyton and Leighton both being sophomores, I should say. But talk about the 3 of them. How fun is it to coach not 1, not 2, but 3 brothers together? How fun is that?
I mean, it's fun. I mean, those guys are all great kids. Like I say, Michael and Leighton, obviously had a lot of time last year. Peyton got his time on a JV squad last year, but he stepped up, and he's basically our first guy off the bench this year. So it's kind of neat. I joked with somebody the other day. I was like, this is the most initials I put in a scorebook probably in all my coaching. I mean, we got the 3 Tophers and the 2 Ratcliffes, so I got all kind of initials going in that scorebook.
Now, would you consider this team? Would you consider the Topher brothers the most set of brothers that you've coached on one team?
Yeah, I mean, we probably had, you know, 2 in the past or whatever, but yeah, 3 definitely. That's the most we've had. So, but you know, at least, you know, as far as getting guys there, you can always count on, you know, if as long as one of them's getting there, then all 3's getting there. So you don't have to worry about 12 guys getting to practice. You only have to worry about, you know, with the 3 and a 2, you know, we're down to like 10 or 11 or 9 or 10 guys, 9 or 10 groups of people we got to get to practice. So.
Well, awesome. Well, last question. I'll get you out of here. And again, I appreciate your time, but you've won 6 state championships during your tenure as a head coach at Wheeling Central. You've seen what it takes to, one, make it to the state tournament, but also to win a state championship. You guys fell short a season ago to Shady Spring. But when you look at this team, what needs to happen for you all to, one, get over that hump and then, you know, sort of be in cruise control through sectional and regional play to get to the state tournament and hopefully to hoist yet another state championship trophy?
Well, you know, I mean, it's tough. There's really no like recipe for it. I mean, you try to do your best. I mean, you know, when people see that a team gets there a lot, they think it's really easy, and it's not. I mean, it's tough to get through sectionals. It's tough to get that regional win, you know. And then obviously when you get to Charleston, I mean, for the most part, you know, you've got 8 really good teams there. So, you know, you have to win 3 more games there. So it's tough. But, you know, for me, I mean, I always hope that just from our tradition and our past experiences, you know, with, you know, having guys come back off of that team from last year, they know what it takes to get there. You know, and I mean, we made a point to them in the offseason, the guys that were coming back. You know, we lost by 12 points, you know, to Shady Spring. You know, basically that's 4 possessions. So, you know, we look at it like every possession's important. You know, if we would have got 4 more stops last year or maybe got 4 more buckets last year, you know, maybe it's a different story. So, you know, those guys have kind of bought into that a little bit. And, you know, we've pretty much, even though we've just, you know, basically pulled a couple games out at the end, I mean, I think they've realized how important every possession is, you know, in the games.
Well, Coach, I appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Best of luck the rest of this way this week and season. And I'll talk to you soon, and good luck.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. That will conclude episode 90 of Hoops Across the Mountain State with our 2 coaches as guests, Coach Jason White from Morgantown High School, and then now Coach Mel Stephens from Wheeling Central High School as well. That will do it for here. For me, I'm Taylor Kennedy on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7. Again, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. We'd love to hear from you, so rate us and review us, and we'll talk soon on episode 91 of Hoops Across the Mountain State.